Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Zoom Rooms and Microsoft Teams Rooms. Hopefully, by the end of this webinar, you'll all be reasonably au fait with what each one is, some differences between them, and the sorts of hardware that you need to create them. Just before we start, there's some housekeeping. Please do ask any questions as they come to your mind. You can use the Q&A button there on the top left. At the beginning, we're also going to do some polls. That's where we ask you some questions. They're multiple choice. They're nice and easy. They're just going to help us understand you guys more as an audience and help us frame any questions you submit into so we can live them to your organisation. If you do have any issues with your audio, there's that little phone button down there. You can switch your audio to a standard telephone connection if you have issues with your speakers. Just a brief agenda. We expect this to take somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes, depending how many questions we have. As I said, please do jump in on the Q&A with any questions as they come to you. So today's speakers, we have me, that's David Savage. I'm the founder of ITSL, which I founded back in 2004. And we're joined by Robert Wilkinson, our commercial director. So just a little bit about the business before we start. We established, as I said, in 2004. We work globally, but predominantly in the UK and Europe. We've deployed 1,200 plus meeting rooms of various sizes, from huddle rooms through to standard meeting rooms, training suites, boardrooms, and auditoriums. We're a very capable team, or we like to think so, over 25 people and growing. We've grown even throughout the previous lockdown and the pandemic, which I think speaks volumes about the quality of the team that we have. We're experts in small, medium enterprise and corporate AV install, so meeting rooms, boardrooms, automation, that kind of thing. And we have a pretty highly regarded support desk.
Hello, yes. So ITSL Group, some of our services, we've got AV system design and consultancy. That's where we look at our client and customers' needs in detail, put a design together, and then provide a solution that meets their requirements. We have a sister company, ITSL Medical, that actually offer a easy-to-use control system, often in Tolly, that's used within the operating theatre environment. And we've been very, very busy over the lockdown, putting together MS Teams rooms and Zoom rooms in organisations, existing meeting rooms, for them looking forward to when they can finally come back to work and use systems. Boardroom automation. Boardroom automation is something that we're very big on in terms of putting together easy to use setups that get rid of all remote controls, that kind of thing. Use an iPad whereby it's a user interface there. We've often called it CEO proof and characterize it CEO proof. Also into large LED tiles where you can do large space, out exterior spaces and stadia, that kind of thing. Internally, it could be within an event space, a large format video wall, or in a large boardroom, that kind of thing. It's where you'd have, you wouldn't have any bezels where you're butting screens together. In fact, with some of the pixel pictures, you can get really, really close without seeing any of the dots at all. Digital signage, we'd be using digital signage in areas like receptions, displaying messaging, news, that kind of thing, ticker tape. And then within retail, also, it would be for advertising and advertising space. Support desk, we feel the support desk is really at the heart of our success. We dedicate a support person to each of our clients that would know the system designs, would know the staff there. It simplifies things when there is any issues or problems, in that we can find a resolution to those problems pretty quick. And with that, we have tailored SLAs, which is in fact having something like remote only, 8-hour response, 4-hour response, or even with a dedicated engineer on site.
So now on to some polls to help us understand you guys a bit better. We're just going to bring up a few questions. I think we've got 4 in total, and we'll just leave it maybe 10, 15 seconds up on screen. So just to help us understand, how many meeting rooms do you have? Please vote now. There we go, voting in. So predominantly smaller meeting rooms or smaller batches, so up to 5, with some of you guys with 20 plus. Super. Okay, on to the next poll question. So are you on the Microsoft side or the Zoom side, or neither? It tends to be what you had when you first, what you were using when the pandemic first hit. That's what we've seen through our customers. If you were using Zoom when the pandemic hit, the use of that skyrocketed, and the same with Teams. Okay, nobody on Zoom. Okay, all right, on to the next question. So do any of you already have a Zoom room or a Teams room? Super, there we go. So it looks like a few of you have both sorts, but predominantly it's none. Right, okay, I think that's the last question. Oh, no, it's not. I stand corrected. Do any of your organizations have VC systems like the legacy Cisco, size Polycom? Yes, okay, so predominantly yes. So we're coming from the world of what we probably call traditional video conference into software-based codecs. So what we have with regards the Teams CVI might be something of interest that we'll come on to in a little while.
What is a Zoom room? A Zoom room is actually a big step up from what would be classed as a normal Zoom user that you may be familiar with in terms of working on your laptop and the limitations that you would have with the webcam and the microphone and that kind of thing. A Zoom room is using dedicated hardware, but it's very specific for the room environment that it's going to work into. But it is essentially, it's a step, once you've got a Zoom account, this would be a separate Zoom room charge for license. It's really designed that when you've been combination with all the kit, it would bring the Zoom experience to more of a dedicated VC room, like a traditional system such as Cisco Polycom that you might have had in the past. You can actually have a second screen as well, or even a third screen with the Zoom room. That would give you able to have different participants on different screens, and then perhaps potentially have the video participants on one screen, and then the content sharing going on the other screen. So it's obviously clearer for all the people in the room. The user doesn't have to bring their own device at all. You have a user touch panel, which would then be integrated with your calendar service. So you, generally speaking, have a one-touch join. So when your meeting's ready to go, you hit the button, and then you're in the room, and you can get on with the meeting. You've also got additional features within the meeting room you can use with a Zoom room, such as you can do present without being on the video call. You can presentation share from your laptop. What is a Teams room? Teams room is very similar to a Zoom room in terms of it's a big step up from a normal Teams account that you might use on your laptop, again with the limitations of webcam, microphone, that kind of thing. You would have dedicated hardware. So then the Teams application would be running on a mini form PC in the room. So then that would be concentrating on the video processing of that. But similar to Zoom, you can have, it does have a dual screen arrangement in the new version of that. So again, you can have video on one screen, content on the other screen, much better within a room where you've got a number of people in there. Again, you don't have to bring a device along to initiate the call. You'd have a touch panel whereby once integrated with your calendar service, it would be all ready to go with one touch join. You hit that button and then you'd be in the meeting.
So we just have a direct comparison of the two room system offerings, starting with Zoom. They're a bit more flexible. They allow you to run on Windows or Mac OS, and the hardware component is more flexible as well. As long as the computer meets the minimum requirements for CPU and RAM, you can use it more or less. The in-room control, you can use an Android tablet, iPad. Plenty of cradles and charging devices are able for those to make them more room-centric and less likely to walk away. And of course, dedicated hardware from various all-in-one systems. The peripherals, Zoom have a first mover advantage really in the room space, and they've been certifying testing hardware for several years now. So they have a wider range available to them. One touch join, which is the key piece of workflow for turning up to the meeting room, pressing a button and getting into the meeting space. Yes, they have that, as long as the meeting is scheduled. Content sharing wise, you can AirPlay straight into that Zoom machine. It comes up on screen. You don't have to be in a call. It can be used for a standard in-person in-room meeting nice and easily. You can share content from the Zoom app or via HDMI adapter. The interop with, in this example, from Zoom Rooms to Teams, you would need at least 2 third-party licenses to get a Zoom room into the Teams environment. On to Teams then. The Teams room runs solely on Windows and only on specified machines, mostly Intel NUCs and the all-in-one kit devices. The in-room control would generally be dedicated hardware from your all-in-one kit, Crestron touchscreen, Logitech Tap touchscreen. Or if you have spare Surface Pros hanging around, you can use those as well, although we've not seen that happen yet. Teams, or the Teams certification of hardware is still growing. It's they've just done a big round with QSC for professional audio, and they're a bit later to the game, but they are catching up quite quickly. For scheduled calls, again, you can do the one-touch join, turning up, press the button, get into your meeting. And the content sharing is slightly more clunky, as in HDMI via an adapter or a more limited mobile app. You can interrupt with Zoom from a Teams room when you join a scheduled meeting. For Zoom, it launches the Zoom client in the background, and then you can use your Teams room to join that Zoom meeting natively.
I'll now go over the strengths and weaknesses, covering first of all Zoom rooms and then moving on to the MS Teams rooms. So with a Zoom room, it works on a wider range of hardware. So you've got a bigger choice in terms of what cameras you use, what microphones you use, etc., within the meeting room. Zoom Rooms has had a head start on the room experience, in that we've been rolling out and deploying Zoom Rooms since 2016 throughout Europe, so that we've got a lot of experience over and above on the MS Teams. Overall, good quality video, I would say, from Zoom. They put a lot of effort into not cutting back on the video quality, even when the bandwidth is struggling a little bit. Another thing is digital signage and room booking software is free with Zoom. So if this is an area that you're looking to invest in, then that's a good way of looking to good value for money. You can call people directly on Zoom. So instead of having to schedule a call, you can actually either bring someone up in your directory and then ring them ad hoc. Also, if you have AirPlay, if you've got Apple device, you can share presentations share your screens using AirPlay method. Or by using the Zoom client, you can then share a presentation or content from your laptop into that Zoom call. With the Zoom connector, it was possible to connect with existing legacy systems using H323 and SIP. So in other words, if you've got existing Polycom systems from Cisco, life size, even today, if they're using WebEx, it's a means that you can actually communicate and have a video call with those platforms. On the negative side, room interface on the touch panel is different from your desktop, so there's a little bit of learning that must be done. So on a large deployment, there's a bit of training you must consider before then doing large-scale changeovers. Licensing can be a little bit costly, whilst the initial license can be seen to be free. Once you start adding on functionality and users, etc., the cost can escalate. So you need to have a close look at that before you deploy it on an enterprise level. And you can't dial into a Teams call without a third-party license. We will come in on to that later on, but you need another kind of gateway to be able to have the call within the Teams environment. Going on to a Teams room, licensing is generally speaking more simple. Once you're on Office 365, it's just about activating a new room as a resource and then adding them on as you please. The interface is tied more closely to the desktop user interface. So in terms of doing a larger deployment, this can be, there was no training and someone will walk into a room and be able to instantly use it because it's going to be very familiar interface than what they've got on their laptop. You can join a scheduled Zoom meeting. What happens there is you can invite the team room into a Zoom call, and what will happen is it will launch up an instance of a Zoom within the Teams window so you can carry out that meeting. And of course, a lower cost of entry if you're already a 365 tenant. So again, it's quite easy to, from a standing start, to roll out a deployment without too much cost implication. Overall, the video isn't quite as good as Zoom. However, in my opinion, the way that they manage the video windows of participants is a little bit better, so it fills up the video space that you've got. But it does rely on scheduling a call. You can't just make an ad hoc call from in the room, so you've got to take consideration of in advance of scheduling the call to be able to then join it from that room. And at the moment, it's got a narrower range of hardware available. Microsoft is slowly certifying more kit, so that would hope to be improving in the future.
Just on the workflow, which is a key piece for any organisation implementing these rooms, about how the call is started, distributed to your guests or participants, and then joined. We've got this little diagram for the Zoom room and the team room. Zoom have got three ways to start a call. You can schedule it traditionally. You can walk into the room and send an invite, or you could directly dial the Zoom user from your directory, or if you've been given their ID. So with a scheduled call, you do it through the Outlook, either on the web or installed software, or the Zoom scheduler. You invite your guests either through your own calendar or sending the iCal file. Once you've invited the room, because the room's connected to a calendar, you get that press to join button. You can walk in and start the meeting. Very much the same for the in-room scheduling. You send the email to your participants, and then you're ready to start the meeting immediately. Direct dial, you can either tap in an IP address if you've got the Zoom H323 connector. You could tap in the Zoom ID, or you could search a directory of contacts to go find the person you want to call up and call them directly. Teams doesn't have that walk in and schedule a call functionality as yet. As you know, software-based codecs, things are always changing and ready for new features. But for the time being, you have the scheduled call option and direct dial within your organization. The scheduled call works exactly the same as Zoom would. You schedule it through Outlook, invite your room, invite your guests, then you get that press to join button. Importantly, if you have a lobby turned on in Teams, you might need your laptop at the moment to admit that to admit your guests or those who are outside of your tenant into the call. You can directly dial those who are on your tenants or those organisations that you're federated with.
Now the hardware was the area that really does make a difference with a Zoom room or a Teams room. You'd have a dedicated small format PC, maybe like a Nook that we've got there, or a mini Mac in terms of Zoom. Now this will be having the Zoom room or Teams room application running solely. So it's got nothing else that it's going to do. It just does that incredibly well. So when compared to a laptop that you may use for your own personal account, whereby it's going to be dependent upon the processing power of the laptop and webcam, etc. So that's where it really steps into its own. And then, of course, with the addition of the touch panel, that means that that's the user interface that's always on show in the room. When it's integrated with your calendar service, then the user will be presented with a one-touch join. These are available from companies like, you've got the Logitech, you've got the Questron that we've got on show there. And then from there, we've got the looking at putting specific cameras and microphones, depending on the size of the room. In a small huddle space, you might use a little wide angle fixed focus camera, similar to the Conftel Cam 20, for instance, and maybe just a little mic pod. Going through to larger spaces, boardrooms, even big conference areas where you'd use a larger camera, pan tilt zoom camera, and with the microphone you might even have an in-ceiling array which could be set up for different sort of environments and conditions during the call or what you got the room set up for. You've got the speakerphone as well for medium-sized rooms. In terms of speakers, you can use the speaker output of the TVs or of a speakerphone, or in a larger space you might have some cabinet speakers or in-ceiling speakers to make sure the audio is heard throughout the whole space. We've got like a sound bar at the bottom there. We'll come on to that on the next slide. So the hardware in terms of all-in-one kits, very, very useful, very easy to deploy. We've got a couple of examples there from Poly and also Questron. This is something that where you might have a challenging room in terms of cabling, or you've got a wide deployment across a number of organizations. As we've done that. We've deployed using this type of technology throughout Europe. You can set them up in a short space of time. You can put them on a cart where you're not concerned about what's going on in the room, and they prove to be fairly inexpensive and quick to deploy, so very popular.
So do they play well together? That is the question we are asked more often than not, and this is often where we start our design process with customers. So if we take this from the room outbound perspective first, so what can the room call out to? On the Zoom side, with that H323 and SIP connector, Zoom rooms and indeed your Zoom users can call out to standards-based systems. So standards-based systems are what we might call the traditional video conference. And I see from the poll, a number of you already have these. So this CRC connector and integration with Zoom rooms might be of interest to you. Microsoft Teams-wise, calling out, it can call out to other Teams scheduled meetings, to Zoom scheduled meetings, WebEx and Skype scheduled meetings as well. Skype's going end of life at some point in June or July, so we won't focus too much on that. Looking at the other way round, you have for Zoom the same kind of functionality. When you have this connector, your standards-based systems can call into Zoom without too much trouble whatsoever. On the Teams side, you can have standards-based systems, Poly, Lifesize, Cisco, etc., calling into your Teams environment, but that is something that is tied to your tenant, and there are some restrictions on that, which we'll come on to in a second. So this is the Microsoft CVI. It is the gateway to get standards-based systems into your Teams environment, and it doesn't have to be Teams rooms. It can be to your Teams users as well who schedule meetings. So CVI stands for Common Video Interface, and it is a service that is tied to your tenant, importantly. So what this doesn't do is allow your Teams users or Teams rooms to go out into that standards-based world, into Poly, Cisco and Lifesize. It's only for users of your tenant who have this are a part of the user group that are allowed to use the integration to schedule meetings that include extra dialing details for a standards-based system to dial in, enter a passcode, and enter that Teams meeting. Now, you might need a laptop in the room to, if you have the lobby, like I said earlier, same with your guests, to allow people in. There are three main resellers, if you will, of the CVI, who are Polycom, BlueJeans, and Pexip. We deal with all three of them. The integration on the whole is the same technically in the back end, but there are some differences in the way they provide their licensing and charge for the service.
So, and now for the costs. So with Zoom rooms, it works out to, so again, you need to be a Zoom user, but a Zoom room will work out to, roughly speaking, £33.25p per Zoom room per month. And MS Teams would be in the region of about £11. Again, you have to be Office 365, but £11.30 per room per month. In terms of the cost with Zoom to have the connector, so that is your 323 standards-based connector, roughly speaking, works out about £399 per year. That's for each concurrent call that you want to go on at the same time. With Teams, to use what we just spoke about on the previous slide, the CVI or the MS Teams Gateway, you could characterize it as ranges from around the £900 to £2,300 per year. That's per concurrent call. So if you want to have, you've got multiple systems, you'd have to have multiple licenses.
So we have some frequently asked questions from our customers. Please do stick your Q&As in that tab now if you haven't done so already, and we'll get round onto those. So how do you purchase the Zoom room? That's through your back-end portal for Zoom. You can do it through your control panel, and then you pair using a code your account to the machine you've elected, or the device you've elected to be your Zoom room compute element, just with a simple code. It's quite easy to do. More or less the same for Teams rooms. You can purchase it in the back end in your licensing portal or from your reseller. On both of those two, we act as resellers for Microsoft and for Zoom, so we can help out with that if it's something of interest. A very, very common question that we have is, can you share the webcam and microphone with other laptops in the room to make it more of a multidisciplinary space where you set up primarily for one technology, maybe Zoom, maybe Teams, but allow someone with a laptop to come in and perhaps host a WebEx call? It can be done. There's various solutions available to allow you to wirelessly share your camera, microphone and speakers into the laptop. We're happy to talk to anyone who has those kind of requirements. Technical question, can you provide your own image for the compute components? Yes, more or less. Zoom's pretty easy. You can do to an extent whatever you like. Microsoft have an image that must be placed on the specified NUC. There's nothing saying though that you can't adapt that image to meet your IT requirements. On how long installations take, it's normally, well, it will vary based on the space. If we look at a simple setup, the kind of things that we've deployed around Europe recently, we would send an engineer out on a plane to meet the equipment on the afternoon, evening of day one. They'd complete the installation day two and come home on day three. So unless it's a particularly large screen that requires two engineers, it's normally just one engineer for a day or a bit less, whether it's installed on a wall or on a trolley or cart. And then finally, on our FAQ, can professional AV equipment be connected to a Zoom or Teams room? Yes, we can connect any equipment in the professional AV world into these systems and pipe in the professional video or picture-in-picture or composite video feeds into that machine to go out on the Teams or Zoom call. The management of that equipment might need another layer of control from the likes of Crestron to give you a user interface to decide what camera you want or what microphones you need. You might have a catch mic and a handheld mic or lapel mics for your presenters on stage. But you do need that extra bit of control that isn't offered by the touch panel on Zoom or Teams. So we have a few questions come through. Costs for each solution. Now the costs, we won't differentiate between Teams and Zoom because on the whole, they're going to be very similar. If we exclude the screen, you might be looking at somewhere between £1,500 and £2,500 for a nice huddle room to medium meeting room solution. The hardware costs, and as I say, the cost between Team and Zoom, we can just assume for the time being they're the same. The sky's the limit in the audiovisual world. So if you have an auditorium you want to put this into, you'll take your £1,000 or thereabouts computer and some adapters, and then it can connect into anything you want. So for organisations running Teams and Zoom, do we recommend allocated meeting rooms or just use one or the other platform?
I could take that one if you like, Dave.
Sure.
So any organisations that are running both Teams and Zoom, that does, I think a couple on our survey earlier on indicated that they did. This is something that you can either think about doing some agnostic meeting room. That's where you'd set the meeting room up with the technology, the Zoom, pan tilt Zoom camera, microphone array, etc. And you'd use a laptop, and you plug into a laptop running either Zoom or Teams or even any other video conferencing software platform to actually get to use that particular that particular flavor. Alternatively, you obviously want a better experience. We have talked to some organisations by setting up some dedicated Teams rooms and dedicated Zoom rooms. You just need to then manage, obviously, everyone's expectations about when they book a room. They need to make sure that they've got the right platform. So there is something you can do across all the way, or start off with an agnostic room and then maybe promote it to a Teams or a Zoom room as you realise the take-up of either platform within your organisation.
One more question. What are the internet requirements for a smooth experience? I think that means bandwidth. So probably about 2 megabits. It's not very much at all to get the call out. All the complexities handled in the respective Zoom and Teams clouds. I'd recommend probably allocating 5 meg per room that you have that's guaranteed bandwidth for each space, and that'll be more than enough to give you a good quality call. Okay, so I don't see any more questions come through. So I think it's time to say thank you very much. Thanks for joining. Please do keep in touch and come to us directly with any questions, as silly as they may seem, about Teams rooms and Zoom rooms. We're just going to put up a quick poll on screen for you to rate us on how we've done with this webinar. Yeah, please do be as honest as you feel. It's been great. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you very much. See you next time.